turning our attention to Austin, Texas, where the news is not great. If you're sitting there with thoughts that Texas is going to be competing for a Big 12 championship, if you're thinking that Texas is going to, in year 2 with Steve Sarkisian, be able to make a big jump and make it all the way to the college football playoff, then, well, it is a big time downgrade. First on the injury front, as we've got both junior wide receiver Isaiah Neyor, remember the big time transfer from Wyoming, very talented. He was going to be lining up opposite Xavier Worthy, and a big reason why you were so excited about what this passing attack could be this season was the idea that you had 2 of the better wide receivers in the entire Big 12 lining up, causing all kinds of problems for defense. But now we've also lost one of our most experienced offensive linemen. Junior Angelau suffered a season-ending knee injury, also a knee injury for Neyor. A couple other, Roschon Johnson, who you'll remember, a running back, also has taken an injury this weekend. And all of this coming as we are looking at this Texas offense with questions about whether or not Quinn Ewers, the highly coveted, much touted quarterback of Texas high school legend, whether he's even going to end up being QB1, as Hudson Card has been, according to reports and according to some of the buzz, Bud Elliott passing along a lot of our good intel from Austin, is pushing for the job. He's taking snaps with the ones. So as you're looking at this at Texas, the injuries, first and foremost, are massively disappointing for Worthy, right? You thought that he was going to be coming in and like all of a sudden be a household name. But now for the offense as a whole and for Texas's outlook, I was not all in on the Texas bandwagon in terms of trying to push this thing like all gas, no brakes was finally going to take off this year. But kind of feels like it's easy to overreact, but it feels like the beginning of one of those like, oh no, our pets' heads are falling off type preseasons for Texas.
Yeah, the roof is caving in a lot quick. It's usually we wait till after Texas has won a game before the roof falls in on top of everybody, but it's not great no matter how you want to look at it. If there is a silver lining as far as Texas is concerned, for Neyor it stinks no matter what, because this is a kid who was good at Wyoming last year, was coming to play at a major program in Power 5 and maybe show that, hey, the stuff I did at Wyoming wasn't just me taking advantage of bad Mountain West defenses. I'm actually pretty good. So for him to be injured, it sucks. But for Texas, honestly, if there is an area where I feel like they can suffer some losses, it is at the receiver spot, because as you mentioned, they do still have Xavier Worthy, who is going to be one of the best receivers in the country. He already is. Jordan Whittingham is still a solid option, and there are other talented options on that depth chart. So I'm confident somebody will be able to step up. And if not one person filling Neyor's role on their own, I do think that by committee, Texas has enough options at the skill positions on offense to where I'm not too worried about them being able to score points. I think the Angelau injury is a much bigger deal because he was going to be the starter at left guard, but he's also the most experienced offensive lineman that the Longhorns have. He started all 12 games last year, 6 at right guard, 6 at left guard. But with the guys who have moved on, he is the veteran leader of this group. And now behind him, you have, it looks like, I don't know for sure, but it looks like freshman Cole Hudson, who was a 4-star recruit, is next in line to take over for him. And while Hudson is highly rated, he is a true freshman. He has not played a college game, let alone started a college game. So to go from your most experienced offensive lineman to a guy who hasn't played a snap yet at the Power 5 level, that could cause problems early in the season. And as you mentioned, it's either going to be Hudson Card at quarterback, who got playing time last year but is not, what you'd call a veteran at this point, or it's going to be Quinn Ewers, who has not taken a snap. So all of a sudden, there's a lot of inexperience at some key positions for this offense that could cause problems. And as we talked about in the win totals pod when we did the Big 12, like Texas's main problem last year was defense. The offense was the one thing that you were kind of relying on to be good. This throws a little bit of a wrench in that the Texas offense could struggle more than we anticipated. And if that's the case and the defense doesn't really, step up and take over for that, there's a lot of high expectations for Texas going into 2022 because it is any college football season that has ever existed. But now there are more questions about whether or not the Longhorns are going to be able to live up to them.
Without a doubt. I mean, if you were looking at that price to win the Big 12, pays out at something like 2-1, 3-1, something like
Which is
that.
already ridiculous.
Yeah, which we discussed on the Big 12 win totals pod. To think that you were going to be the 9 on there is taking into consideration a game against Alabama, and the fact that you're still one of the favorites says that the odds makers believe that a couple of losses in conference play is going to still be able to get you in one of those top 2 spots to win the Big 12. I'll say this: I think that Texas with Hudson Card could still be one of the top 2 to 3 teams in the Big 12, but you go from being able to take charge and jump to the front of the standings to needing everybody to beat up on each other and needing everybody to just sort of like play down to the pack, to have it just be one of those crazy seasons when you start November, all the contenders have at least one loss, and then it's just going to end up on who has the tiebreakers. But if you are the Longhorns, the idea that this thing is not, if you are a Longhorns fan, the idea that Quinn Ewers is not grabbing hold of this the way that we thought he would is a little bit disappointing. And I will say it's disappointing just because I thought that Quinn Ewers was going to be such a fun story, such a big star. The playmaking within this offense, I thought could be electric and something that a lot of fans would enjoy getting behind. He could still be the starter, right? I mean, we could see Steve Sarkisian again in the opener against ULM. You are probably going to see both of them. Maybe Hudson Card starts in week 2 against Alabama, but then Quinn Ewers comes in as a change of pace. I think you've still got 2 quarterbacks that when you stack them up against the rest of the Big 12, you're still talking about top half of the conference. Is that fair? Texas's quarterback room in terms of depth and overall ceiling is probably the best in the Big 12. And if we're going to line up the quarterbacks, they're probably both in the top 6 or 7.
Yes, for sure. And I mean, I have a couple questions for you. I want to know what you think about this. Like we have seen today and last night, we've seen a couple quarterbacks enter the transfer portal because they've become aware that they will not be winning the starting jobs. First, do you think there's any chance that this Hudson Card stuff is kind of floating around now because it's like we don't want him to enter the portal? And if something happens to Ewers, we want to still have him as our number 2. And also, if it's true and Card is, really pushing for the starting gig, is your initial reaction that, hey, that's great, Hudson Card must be playing really well, or is it, Quinn Ewers might be disappointing?
I think that it might be a matter of, so first question, yes, without a doubt, you have to take into consideration with all quarterback battles that part of the calculus for any coaching staff is going to be trying to maintain depth, knowing that you are potentially going to lose somebody to the transfer portal. I mean, Texas could have had another capable quarterback on this roster, but guess what? Casey Thompson's off somewhere else playing. Like this is, they are very aware of how thin things can get if the quarterbacks start to leave. So yes, it is a potential, but I also could see it being a situation where Card, who at his best has looked, pretty capable, and again was a blue chip 4-star guy, one of the top 10 players coming from the state of Texas. The idea that he would be, answering the challenge, and the idea that he would be raising the bar and bringing the competition, I think that should say, hey, that's great. Hudson Card is playing very well. And I also think that it could be a motivation tool for Quinn Ewers, where you want to make sure that somebody who maybe, I'm going to overstep my bounds here, but when you are the extremely highly touted quarterback recruit and you reclassify and you go to Ohio State and there's the whole NIL deal as a freshman, and then you immediately turn around and you go to Texas, and I could see there being a potential that if you believe this job is locked up, there might be just too much confidence in a way that might alert the coaching staff to be, hey, we got to light a fire under this guy. So yes, I do think that it's a potential that they are trying to keep Hudson Card from transferring. I do think that there's a potential that Card could be playing well, but that other piece is what I'm also looking at, where they also just might be trying to massage this quarterback battle a little bit just to make sure that they get to where they want to be at the end, which is Quinn Ewers 100% dialed in, playing some of his best football when they need it in week 2